What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Variant the Podcast. I'm Arris with Tim Conley.
Greetings once again, Variant Nation. Welcome back to the show, the Batman show.
I got the Batman Variant books with me.
That's right. We are continuing our conversation. For those of you who saw the spoiler-free review of the film a couple of days ago, as promised, this is going to be our full spoiler discussion of the Batman. So if you are here, you know what's going down.
Mm-hmm.
There are spoilers galore, full spoilers for the Batman. From this point forward, we are going to talk
Batman dies.
Yeah, like in the first 5 minutes of the film. He's dead.
And it's actually not a Batman film.
Yeah, and Riddler takes over the cape and cowl.
It's a Batmite film. Hey, they referenced him in Peacemaker. What'd you guys think? What you think was going to happen?
But yeah, so we are going to get into it. And first, I guess we can start by just reiterating both of us liked the film.
You're like love.
I started to say love, and I wrote myself back.
Like I said it.
Would you say love?
Not yet. I have to see it a second time.
Okay.
I have to see it a second time.
Yeah.
I need to watch it 2 or 3 more times before I could solidify final thoughts.
Yeah.
So this is still like, initial, reaction to the film. And like I said in the spoiler-free review of the Batman, solid 8 out of 10 for me. I feel like I just rate things because I feel like that's the easiest way for people to be like, he liked it. It's a scale, so it's like, so that's like A minus B plus, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really, really enjoyed it. It was a detective movie through and through.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said in the spoiler-free version, I love the fact that it was very familiar yet very different.
Yeah.
Where the different obviously would be detective movie, live action. We never really got something to this extent, live action, where it's just 7 merged with Batman. We've been saying that. A lot of people have been saying that. It's literally, you took 7 and you threw Batman in that universe, detective noir kind of film.
If 7 was really roped back.
Yeah. Although there's some
gluttony scene. Oh my God.
Dude, there's some things that Paul Dano does in here where I think we'll talk about them in a little bit as we talk about the characters,
Right.
but like I do just want to say like it is like the Zodiac killer mixed with Jigsaw from Saw.
Yeah. Okay.
Because with the contraptions and stuff, very Jigsaw, and then Zodiac killer because crazy serial killer.
I would have said. I thought you were going to say. So this was for me. I thought because I said it actually right out as the movie finished. I said his portrayal of the Riddler kind of reminded me of his role in Prisoners.
That too.
With Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, crazy.
So he was incredible in that film, Paul Dano, and his persona just not as. It wasn't as this beaten down character as he was in Prisoners. So in this, he is, but it's not as extreme in his portrayal. Mm-hmm. But he took like a little piece of that and then applied Zodiac Killer to it. Yeah, that's kind of it.
But I just like the mood of the film, like the whole tone and vibe it has. The more I'm thinking about the way Batman interacted with the cops of the GCPD, where again they're saying they think he's this weirdo freak. They've known he's been a Batman for 2 years, and Jim Gordon has befriended him over that time and lets him in on the crime scenes where all the other cops are like, what are you doing? Like, what? Don't let him in. He's like, he's with me. And Batman doesn't say a dang thing to him. He's literally Gordon even tries to talk to him, and Batman rarely responds to him because he's analyzing the crime scene. Yeah, people give him smart remarks. Batman just looks at him, which I gotta say, Pattinson, this guy, Tim, like with his looks, the way you could get across the emotions with just him doing a look was incredible. Because we saw that the intensity in his eyes from the trailer, like in the trailer where the car comes crashing into like that funeral and you just see Bruce Wayne staring off like at, in the distance to the Riddler, which again, you see that in the trailer. Crazy. And the same thing like Under the Cowl when he's like looking at cops making fun of him or thugs and the Iceberg Lounge and all that stuff. Just right. It's nuts. I thought just the demeanor he was able to portray without saying anything was some of the best we've seen for a live action Batman. Again, I need to see the movie again, but initial impressions is like, that is great.
At any point, did you feel like some of the brooding, some of the kind of little bit emo goth brooding was a little bit much?
Yes, but as the movie went on, I feel like the movie kind of explained it, because that's one of the things that I thought was cool. It took me a little bit off guard, but as the movie went on, you're like, oh, so again, second year of Batman. Like, he's even rude to Alfred in this movie.
Yes.
Like, he's not even, it's not full on like that surrogate father relationship yet. Like, Bruce hasn't really accepted that yet.
But he doesn't. He doesn't appreciate it.
Right. He's not.
It's just subtly.
He's not mature yet. Right. And you kind of see that get established in this film, like towards the middle, which was, for me, being a massive Batman fan, one of the coolest parts of the film, because one of the most important parts to Batman's mythos is his relationship with Alfred. Without Alfred, you could argue that his mission on crime wouldn't even be a thing.
Yeah.
Like, he helps him in so many ways, constantly helps him, builds tech for him, patches him up. He's his surgeon, his father, his cook, his chef. Like, without Alfred, Bruce would probably just die.
I mean, he says it. One scene in the film where Alfred actually gets hurt. They're talking, and Bruce is sitting next to his bedside, and they're talking, and he says to him, he apologizes. He's like, "Look, you needed a father, and all you had was me." And he feels like he fails him. That's a scene where there's like where you first see Bruce really start to understand like who Alfred is to him, or at least acknowledge it.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
It's a great scene in the movie, yeah.
And Alfred isn't in the movie that much.
He's not. That is one of the things that kind of was a disappointment for me. And that's just purely because I love Andy Serkis, but also because he's really good in that role.
Mm-hmm.
So the little bit that we did see him, he's great. So I'm excited to see them expand on that.
Yeah, I loved how it came full circle, because, again, early on in the film, when you see Bruce go into the Batcave for the first time, you see their first interaction, and it was Bruce is kind of dismissive of Alfred, and then when you get to that point after he gets hurt, it comes full circle where Bruce even like holds his hand, like while he's hurt in bed. I'm like, yeah, that's so Bruce and Batman, right? Where even when Bruce shows emotions, it's always with restraint. And he even said it in that dialogue with like, it's because of like the fear, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's Batman. Like, at the heart of it, Batman is only Batman because his emotions and stuff like that. And Reeves and everyone involved nailed that.
Yeah.
And it was just like a 5-minute scene, but I'm like, wow, that was a very important part to establish Batman in this world.
I completely agree. It was cool to see that Batman Year One vibe of this really young, which we knew we were getting, but it was really, that was, I think, one of the more interesting parts of this movie, was seeing them play out this young Batman who is purely driven by vengeance and rage.
Yes.
Anger of what he's been through, and the fact that, the city has, fallen into this corrupt state.
Yeah.
And that his father, who he viewed as this, he's really deified in his mind as this great, great man. To see him taken down by it, to where he's left just trying to to a point to where he's just like, I don't care if I die.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even care about death.
Which is really cool. And again, for longtime Batman fans like me, it's like true. The only thing he cares about is the few people that he loves in his life. He doesn't care if he dies.
Right.
Which is, he puts his life on the line every single
Constantly.
night. But if you threaten someone that he cares about, that's where it's going to
But I thought they did a good job in this film of showing that that I don't care what happens to me thing was in an unhealthy way.
Yes, for sure.
To where by the end of the film, there's this evolution that takes place that he recognizes right toward the end, where he's just like, okay, my motivation for not caring what happens to me has to change. Like, it's not caring about what happens to you can be a good thing if it's driven for the right reasons. But prior to, it was driven by the wrong things.
Yeah.
It was just almost like a sense of guilt and all of these sorts of things that you see that progression where he starts to realize, like, okay, I can't be this.
Yeah.
By the end of the film, which I think, it's very subtle. It's really not overt per se. They do a good job though of relaying that by the end of the movie. The one thing I will say about that is, while they did do that, and they even showed the initiation of his relationship with Celina Kyle, I was a little bit, it felt a little bit in its introduction, it just kind of felt a little bit dragged.
Really? You thought so?
Yeah, I felt like they could have done it much faster, to where we could have seen more of what we saw of him at the end. We could have seen a little bit more of that earlier.
Are you talking
in
about
the film?
You thought it was dragged, his introduction to Celina? Is what you're saying?
No. Just his him, like all of the introductory portions of like his relationships and all that kind of stuff, I just felt like it was extended too long. And that was some of the pacing issues that I had with the film, where even like his evolution of kind of snapping out of this and finding out certain things about his family and, you know, his family history, which were some of the big changes in the film or the big additions to the mythos in this particular world that Matt Reeves is building for Batman.
Which really, for me, I told you was like, oh, so this is like kind of Elseworlds vibes.
The big
we
realization,
knew this wasn't part of the DCEU.
Right.
We knew that Matt Reeves was very vocal that when he was talking to Warner Brothers, he's like, I want to do like my thing, which is why he's getting his own universe. He's getting GCPD on HBO Max, the Penguin show, all that good stuff. And it made all the sense. Where because of that, because I'm a continuity junkie, but because we knew going in that this is something else,
I
was like, no,
and you're dope. Okay with that.
You're okay. I was like, that's cool.
It makes it fine.
This is because we're actually gonna have Batfleck and Keaton in the Flash. So it's like we got three Batmen this year, dude.
Yeah.
That's
and there's
crazy.
hints that Keaton's Batman might continue on.
He's in Batgirl.
Yeah.
So
we'll see how that goes.
And we know Affleck is not. He's out.
And I will say the changes that they did make, or I should say the additions, not the changes. The additions that they made.
I guess you could say they're changes for sure.
They're changes. It's different from the continuity and regular
lore.
canon.
Yeah.
Or main canon, I should say. So the ones that they did say to the kind of like novice film goer or whatever, or just kind of just a regular film goer or person that just said, I'm just going to go, I know Batman. I like Batman. Batman's fun. Who's someone who's not really deep into comics or is not like a real Batman fan. They're probably going to seem very minor. You might not even notice them. You might just see them as part of like, it's just part of the story.
If you're a casual Batman fan, you're not into like the books or like animated movies and like always deep into Batman, you won't notice.
Yeah, like one of them being, just as example, is the fact that Bruce's mom, Martha, her maiden name is Arkham. And she's a member of the Arkham family, which of course or founded the Arkham Asylum, and she actually had mental health issues at one point. And that's kind of part of the backstory that he learns about his family, and they just kind of say it, and it's part of this kind of storyline. That gets added to like the why certain things transpired in Bruce's life. But again, if you're not like a huge Batman fan or a fan of, DC Comics where the lore really well, you might not even pick up on that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, just little things like that were instituted into the film.
Well, it was very like, I guess to that point, it was very, Earth 1, because in that sense where like in main continuity, yes, that's not a thing, but Earth 1, the Jeff Johns thing, she is, her lineage is to Arkham, which is why I was like, oh, literally Elseworld. So you're just kind of pulling from everything, from all things Batman,
right? And that's why I say, unless you're a real Batman fan, you're not even going to pick up on that. You'll just, you know what I mean? If you're like a real DC fan or a real Batman fan, and you've read things like Earth 1, you're going to know like, oh, that's like,
it also makes
related
sense
to this over here. And
because Andy Serkis, we were saying that before, is very much also the Earth 1,
without doubt,
Alfred, where he's more like, he seems like he's military,
like
and
former special forces, yada yada,
all that stuff. So but that's kind of one of the things I like about the movie so much, is there's so much, like, it's an amalgamation. That's why I said it's very familiar yet different.
Tons of nods and tips of the hat.
Earth 1 references and things that they pulled from that world. The Arkham series, the Arkham games, Batman the Animated Series, the Nolan films. Like, there's just, you could tell Matt Reeves just loves Batman.
Yeah.
So he picked some of his favorite things and just put them in here, which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of like love letter-ish in that sense. Like, if you're a Batman diehard, you'll be picking out like there's even parts where you see like the word hush on a screen, which is obviously hush. Like it's like a little like hush, get it? So I thought that stuff was very, very cool.
Yeah, no, I loved all of that stuff. That's one of the things I said. I was like, this movie I felt like this whole movie, he just was nodding to the entire history of Batman.
Yes.
There's so many different like little nods to various pieces, everything from Batman the Animated Series all the way through even the Nolan films.
Dude, that shot where you see, it's early on in the film, I believe it's in the first 10, 20 minutes of the film, when you're getting the narration from Batman as he's talking, where
Mhm.
you see the city, you see the bat signal, and you see the helicopters in the sky, like right behind. I'm like, dude, like
Super cool.
that is, they're supposed to be in the animated series, they're
The
blimps, but that's obviously like where
Yes.
he got that
But
kind of
even the
idea
Batman
from.
animated series, you have helicopters.
There's a lot of,
and
yeah,
a
for
lot
sure.
of that stuff.
So I was like, and even just the world, the way Gotham looked,
Yes.
that felt very Arkham, out of the Arkham games.
I
I'm
agree.
like, this is basically like I'm watching a cinematic out of the
Yeah.
Arkham verse franchise.
Yeah, it was, and even, I mean, just every aspect of this film, it felt like it was pulled from a different piece of Batman history.
It's very cool.
And I thought that part of it was really, really cool. My only real gripes with this film, it was all pacing and story related. And when I say story related, I mean that this was a full blown detective film.
For 100%.
They told us this going in. Again, I said this in the spoiler-free version. They told us going in, this is a detective movie. This is unlike the Batman films that you're used to.
They did not front.
Yeah, and they were not kidding. This is a classic detective story. Now, that being the case, I love Sherlock Holmes is one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. I love a good detective story. Batman, being the world's greatest detective, that's one of the greatest aspects of him as a character, is his intelligence, his ability to deduce and really forensically break down a scene and all that kind of stuff. But with the story with this one, I just felt like the story they went with the Riddler was, I wish it was more of a mystery than it actually was. It was pretty straightforward from start to finish. You knew who the villain was going in. They pretty much told you very early on what he was doing, right? And you already kind of could get a sense very, very early why he was doing it. It was and in the end, it ended up being very similar in terms of like the villain's motivation to the League of Shadows motivation in Batman Rises or The Dark Knight Rises, where it's very politically driven.
I mean,
it's about corruption, and we're undoing the corruption, and we're taking down the man, and all this kind of stuff. And it was a lot of like modern political references in this film, which I guess I wasn't surprised, but I was a little surprised as how much it was in terms of like kind of some of the current political environment. They roped in some of that. But it had a similar Dark Knight Rises theme in terms of the motivation for the villain, which for me, I kind of felt that was disappointing for me. It was just kind of overly simplistic. I really would love to have seen more of a murder mystery where there was twists and turns and you really didn't know where it was going and then there was a big twist or a surprise at the end. Like if you're going to go that route, that for me is the fun ride that I would like to have seen from this. Again, I love that they went that route. I think that's a very cool route to go. I just wish that it wasn't just so kind of straightforward and there was no real surprises. There were add-ons, like little things like what we talked about where, you find out that it's a hidden secret of the Wayne family that, Martha Wayne had some mental health issues. You find out that it's a secret about his Thomas Wayne's relationship with Carmine Falcone. Little things like that, where it's like, one of the things that you learn about a third of the way through the film is that, Catwoman, Celina Kyle's father is Carmine Falcone.
See, I
she
think
just kind of blurts it out, though.
I feel like those are big things, though. Those are huge pieces.
They are. I think for Batman and DC fans, I think those are like really cool ads.
Well, even
in terms of like the story, it wasn't anything for me. It was there was never a moment where I was like, whoa.
See, I didn't mind all of that. I thought that was the part of the mystery, right? It wasn't like the whole point was, what does the Riddler know that Bruce doesn't? Because that's the whole point, right? The whole story is he's trying to figure out what Riddler knows and why he's doing this. And along the way, he finds out revelations about his own family, which is a big one with his mom and then his father. And then the little things, which would be Carmine and Celina, how she's his dad and stuff like that. The renewal fund and all that, like that was the mystery, right? Just like, hey, you think you're the one saving the city? Well, I guess that's another thing, right? Where towards the end, you think the Riddler, it kind of seems like the Riddler knows who Batman is.
That I thought was the coolest part.
But like, it turns out no.
As far as like their interactions.
Right. But that was pretty cool where Bruce thought that he knew, he really didn't know. So he thought that like the Riddler was coming after him because it's like, you think you're good and innocent, but you're trying to save the city, but your family is rotten too.
Yeah.
So but it turned out that not. So that was like a twist in itself because it led us to believe that even in that scene, you're like, oh, and it wasn't until that shot where he says it again and he realizes like, because you see it pan to the security camera, he's like, dang it, he's telling the freaking world who I am. But he realizes with the following sentence, he's like, okay, no, he doesn't. He's just And I thought that was really, really cool. That was a twist in itself.
That scene, I thought they did a tremendous job with, where you get to the end there and Bruce is is right after they capture the Riddler. And they, set that scene you see at the beginning of the first big trailer.
The coffee shop.
The coffee shop. And Edward gets captured. They are up in his apartment, and he actually they're going through his apartment and they find they're doing the forensics and they're, going through all the evidence, and they find I don't know if it was a file on the computer or another flash drive. And they're starting to open it, and they're seeing all this evidence, and Batman's starting to piece together, this idea of like, oh, he knows I'm Bruce Wayne. And so he's looking around at everybody thinking everybody's about to find out that I'm Bruce Wayne. And so he's not sure. And so they tell him that the Riddler wants to see him at Arkham. Because again, he's been captured, transferred to Arkham. And he goes there. And that whole scene, as it unravels of that back and forth between there, where you're not sure, they did an excellent job with that scene.
It was great.
Where that was the only time in the movie where I was really genuinely had that feeling of like, what's about to happen.
Well, even Alfred thing too, because I saw you.
But it was so fast.
Yeah, but you were like, no, you better.
Yeah, I was like, you better not. When Alfred gets injured, they kind of make it for a second, like they give you like a very small beat where you think maybe he might have been killed. But of course he wasn't. You kind of know, because you're like, you can't kill Alfred that fast.
But it's like, are you though?
Yeah, but you weren't sure for a second, but it's literally like a 10-second flip. So it's not really that big of a deal. But that was the only time in the movie where I really felt edge of the seat. Like
his interrogation scene.
Yeah, that interaction between him and the Riddler, where it's just like, what's going to happen here?
Well, even
the rest of it, but while good,
but everything led up to that moment though. Literally,
sure,
because also in that moment, besides the whole Bruce thing, the big thing that the Riddler thought he was working with Batman the whole time. Like in his psychotic, crazy brain. He's like, no, we're doing this together. Like, you were figuring out the clues, you bring him into the light, and you brought him into the light for me. That's how I was able to do that. Yep. And like and Batman's like, no, you're a psychopath. What are you doing? That's not this thing. It clicks.
He realizes, that's when Riddler realizes, like, oh, I fooled him.
Right.
Like, he did what I wanted him to do, but he didn't know he was doing what I wanted him to do. And that disappointed the Riddler. He's like, you're not as smart as I thought you were.
Well, that, and he's like, oh, you're not working with me. We're not doing this together. And he's like, no, this is not how it's supposed to be. Like that whole, like, in his freak out where it's like, oh, I just love the idea of someone being so crazy that they think putting all these riddles and stuff and basically forcing someone's hand is that person working with you. I thought that was great for any villain, especially a Batman villain, where it's a psychology, because most Batman villains are good because of psychology behind it. Definitely the Riddler. It's all about his intelligence. So I thought seeing that flip.
You saw some of that in Batman Forever.
Yeah.
With Jim Carrey's version, where before he went full, like Bruce Wayne was like his hero.
Yes. So I thought that was really cool that they explored this, obviously in a way more serious, psychotic, cool way. And then to see the switch of it is like, what? We're not? Okay. Well, this is not. He literally say, no. This is not how it was supposed to go. And he just, goes full AWOL, and then it's like, well, I got one more plan. I got one more trick up my sleeve. So let it all burn.
And he's like, because he's like, you didn't figure it out.
Yeah.
It goes along with him realizing, like, wait a minute, you don't know? You don't know what I'm about to do?
And that's when he says, I thought you're not as smart as I thought you were.
But again, even that, like all of those pieces, and again, I don't want to make it sound like it was bad. It was not. It wasn't. It was good. It just wasn't for me. It just was not a mystery. A lot of it was just really glaringly obvious of what was going to be. So it really didn't surprise me at all. It felt predictable, I guess is the best, easiest way to say it. While good, while the way that they carried out the story they were telling, they did a good job with it. So from a story building, you know, a filmmaking perspective, all of it is good. I feel like it was dragged on too long. I think there's a lot of things that could have been trimmed out to make those films shorter and make the pacing feel faster and a little bit more effective, in my opinion. But overall, you still walk away going, that was good. But it felt like 3 hours. It shouldn't feel like 3 hours.
That's one of my big gripes.
And I think, and to have something be 3 hours and never really feel like you're surprised. That for me was a disappointment.
It's because when we got to the third act, I felt like there was 2 different times it could have ended, or it was ending, and I'm like, oh, you're going again.
Yeah,
there was like I believe 2 where I'm like, yeah, no, okay, yeah, oh, still no, all right, and then it finally ended. So yes, that if you're feeling that definitely means, again, I'm sure people don't. For me, that would mean that, like, all right, I'd be fine with you ending right here, like 20 minutes knocked off or whatever.
And again, I kept waiting for a bigger twist. Because I already it was kind of just a stereotypical reasoning. You know what I mean? It was even just from when you find out the different pieces along the way, it's exactly what you thought. You've seen that before.
Yeah.
So it's not bad. It's just nothing. There was no surprises. I never felt like I'm not sure what's going to happen here because they're really taking me on a ride. I never got that from this film. And for a detective film that's 3 hours long, I really would have, that's what I wanted them to give me, and I just never got it. And that's where my disappointment came in for this film.
Really? Because I was just wanted to see Batman trying to figure out a case, and that's what they did.
They definitely did that. It was definitely, it's kind of like...
Were you looking for like a massive hook, like going into the next film or something like that?
Well, because this is a detective noir film.
Definitely more detective than it's got noir in there, but it's more like crime
80s.
Drama.
It feels like an 80s, like late 70s, 80s with like the way the cops dress and stuff like that.
I love that.
It's like this weird mix of like 80s, 70s, 80s vibe with modern.
It's B-Taz all the way, especially with the way the cops dress with like the leather jackets, the 80s, 70s cop hats.
Yeah. So you have this detective noir story kind of going on, and again, if you're going to go that Batman, and the reason I say detective heavy is there were action scenes in this film. There was some really cool action moments in this film.
A lot,
but not a ton. It was largely drama driven.
For sure, which again is very cool.
It made it very different. That's why I'm not emphasizing the action beats, because
they said this.
While there was a couple, and like I would say half of them we already saw in the trailers. The trailers made this look much more action-packed than it actually was. It had the times that you had action moments, like the first time, and this isn't an action moment, but like one of the really cool things is just a cool Batman moment is when he first revs up the Batmobile.
Oh yeah, it was
and
amazing.
That thing starts, the jet turbine kicks in, and the sound of that thing is they killed that. The sound mixing and the sound engineering on this film is really, really good. And that particular thing, what they went with the sound of the Batmobile, just beastly.
Really
where
cool.
You were just, and
we saw it in Dolby
like a
too.
jet.
We saw it in Dolby.
Well, IMAX.
Oh, did
we saw it on IMAX.
It was IMAX. Whatever. Still, the sound system in the theater was insane.
Crazy. But they had it. It sounds like a jet turbine warming up. Like a fighter jet almost.
It actually was a unique sound because we used to have many Batmobiles live action, obviously, and this was
very different.
This was actually, I think,
intimidating,
the most beastly one.
Yeah,
which was shocking, especially coming off of the Snyder one or the Batfleck one, because that Batmobile was just a freaking tank. But the sound design they did for this one was like
muscle car meets fighter jet.
It was crazy.
That's how I saw it.
Crazy.
And it just keeps revving up, and everybody in the theater is just going, oh, because it just kept building.
And you see like it light up
really
blue,
cool.
the engine and stuff.
Really cool.
Yeah.
So it had those moments scattered throughout they were sprinkled in throughout the film. Another thing, this is another thing. I don't know if you noticed this about Batman that I was just like, why are they keep doing that? Is Batman, like there was in every time he entered a room, it was like he thought he was walking into a street in an old Western. He did this slow walk every time he entered anywhere. to where it was like this slow, like Clint Eastwood, like a cha-ching, cha-ching.
Yeah, it was dope.
Cha-ching. It was cool the first time, but then it just kept happening over and over again. You're just like, why are we still watching him walk in slow motion?
No, you even saw that when,
but not in slow motion. It's all full speed. He's just walking that slowly.
You even hear like the cowboy. They definitely use like cowboy spur sounds because when he's walking towards Penguin, you see that in the trailer too. Yeah. He's walking towards Penguin after their car chase, and Penguin's upside down in the car. Yeah, you hear like the spurs like the metal or chain like clanging.
It's his feet hitting the water.
Yeah,
on the floor.
But it was like the sound design wise, it's like they threw in Western sounds.
Yeah,
which I thought was cool.
And I think if you do that, I think a couple of times was cool. Like it's right at the beginning of the movie when he confronts that gang of clowns.
Oh yeah,
right.
Awesome.
You see that in the trailer too. That whole scene's really cool. That's the first time you see Batman in the film, and they did that where he's walking out of a dark tunnel. And it's meant to show that the level of fear that he's managed to build up in the city with criminals. And he kind of is narrating at this point. And he's saying like talking about the power of fear in the sense of like against crime fighting or in crime fighting. So he comes walking out of a tunnel and it's that same slow walk. And that first time you're like, it's cool. And then it just keeps happening. Like when the first time he goes in the crime scene where the Riddler kills the mayor. Right at the beginning of the movie is another thing that you see in the film where he's duct taping somebody's face. That's like beginning of the movie. That's I think the first thing you see actually is Riddler kill that guy.
It's the first crime, yeah.
Yeah, it's the first crime in the film. And so he winds up at that crime scene, same thing. He's walking in and he's just walking really slow. So you're kind of like, you get, that one didn't bother me again because this is him going into a room full of cops. And he knows his only friend is Jim Gordon. Nobody else wants him there. They all think they're calling him a freak, so on. The then commissioner, I can't remember his name in the film, basically tells Jim to get him out of there.
That's another thing, because Jim is a lieutenant in this movie.
Yeah, he's a lieutenant. He's not yet Commissioner Gordon. So he basically is like, what are you doing? This guy should not be here, that sort of thing. What are you trying to do to me? And he tells him to get him out of there. So nobody wants him there. So you're like forgiving. But then every subsequent time he enters a room, it's the exact same slow Western walk.
You are really going down on this movie, Tim.
And that was another thing. That I get. This one is like a nitpick because it was just something I was like, why do they keep doing that?
Because it's awesome.
But it was little things like that. And the reason I bring it up is because it speaks to the pacing. Do that once or twice. Cool effect. Like it has an effect on the scene for dramatic emphasis or whatever. But you just keep doing the same thing and you're dragging things out unnecessarily, in my view. And that kind of stuff went on throughout the film where they kind of dragged some things out that didn't need to be and really added a lot of time to this film that made it feel like 3 hours.
I feel like
that, along with the story being relatively predictable.
Yeah, as far as pacing issues, it's not that kind of stuff. It's the fact that I feel like once we hit a certain point, you could have just wrapped it up quicker. Like it didn't have to go on to like, but then you have these guys, It
wasn't for that. It wasn't just that for me. It was that there's things throughout the film that just kept adding time and stretching things out.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like, but again, that particular one you're mentioning with like Batman walking in the crime scene stuff, I just thought that that was kind of part of the mood that I liked. That scene, where it established like how he acts at crime scenes again, and it's because we never really seen it to that extent before on the big screen. So I loved seeing like him just looking around, analyzing. One of the coolest aspects too was that he wore contacts that were video recorders.
That was cool, yeah.
And so cool. Everything. So he's purposely looking and staring at things because that's another thing. They're looking like, what the freak is this guy doing? Like, come on, let's go. And he's purposely looking at things because he's recording it.
Yeah.
So he wants to be able to go back later and read that thing on the wall or see that situation, which I thought was awesome.
I actually really liked how I thought Matt Reeves did a really smart thing with explaining that in the film. They didn't do it with Batman. They did it with Celina Kyle. He gave Celina his eye contact, which is a scanning device, and he had her go into a club to collect information for him. And he's telling her, because he's basically watching her from monitors because he can't go in there. And he's telling her, like, hey, look back at that guy. I need time to be able to scan, to ID him. And he explains what that thing is and what it does through that scene, which I thought was very smart.
it was a really cool ad, like, and that kind of stuff reminded me again of like the Arkham games and stuff. It's very much an Arkhamverse piece of tech to do. Even the electroshock gloves on his gauntlets in the beginning of the film, you see that. So it's weird. Like going back to what I was saying earlier, it's like it's probably hopefully it will be a middle, because there's a lot of elements in this movie that was like, all right, it is like still fantastical but grounded too. So I think it's gonna be a middle ground of like the Nolan verse and the Snyder verse. Right. I think it's gonna be in there, which is very, very cool. But I want to talk about Batman's fighting. What did you think about Batman's fighting? Because for me, that was another minor gripe where I keep saying it, but the whole, like, if you're watching this, you can see my gesture. If not, it's the whole like short like blocks that are just like which was a big complaint for Christian Bale's Batman fighting, where it was just like, you know, just like kind of short, quick, blunt moves and strikes, not like the amazing fight scene in BVS. I don't think we're ever gonna get a better Batman fight scene than the warehouse scene in BVS. Because that is Batman fighting.
I could not agree with you more. And honestly, that's kind of why I was emphasizing. There's not a ton of action in this film.
But even when there is,
but it's sprinkled in.
But even when that's another one.
Because
one of my
if
minor
you
gripes.
don't know that going in, you're going to be really disappointed.
And again, we were saying it. They said it. They were not shy about this. Matt Reeves was very vocal,
honest,
in fandom and everything. He's like, this is a detective film.
Yep.
So it's I just want to let everyone else know, like, he's not lying. So don't go into this thinking you're gonna see like, you know, the Snyder cut or something where like all these action scenes every other minute and fight. No, it's finding out who's in the wrong here, what the Riddler's doing, with a little bit of action here and there. But anyway, the fighting, I was at least hoping when we did see the fighting was going to be new and different. To me, it was very much like, I'm not a fan of like those like close blocking and just like short elbows. It's cool, it can be brutal, but I want like, again, I think the best way to describe it is like what you see in the Arkham games, because that's some of the coolest fighting we've seen for Batman, or the warehouse scene from BVS, where he's doing these flippies, he's using his grappling hook to like, you know, pull people towards him or pull himself faster to someone, doing like all these crazy like kicks and barrel rolls and stuff. And it was very much just like elbow, fist. It was a properly paced
and in terms of speed, it was the right speed version of Christopher Nolan's Batman's fighting.
It was better. It was definitely better.
It was just the sped up. The problem with Christopher Nolan's version is it was so slow.
You know what it was for me? Because when we saw in the first trailer, 2-3 years ago now, when we see Batman freaking rail into that dude who's wearing like the white makeup, which is in the beginning of this film, and we're like, what? Like, for me, that was still the best fight scene. They showed the best fight bit in the trailer. That was it.
Like 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I thought we were going to get more of like that. And we got Batman being brutal to some people, but not like cool like that. Like everything.
It was the same thing every time. It was the same fight moves for I don't think that's being fair. There was a couple. The fight scene at the end where he's fighting those guys on that scoreboard or whatever, the round scoreboard in Madison Square Garden. Like, and they're going in a circle and he's taking people down and flipping from, moving from rafter to rafter. Like, that was cool. Like, there was some really cool beats in that.
But even like another cool scene, like I feel like the two best scenes were in the trailer, where you see he's walking in the hall and the machine guns are firing at him, and it's going like in and out like a strobe light.
But you see that
in the trailer, and it was one of the coolest scenes. So I feel like for me, the two coolest fight bits we already saw in the trailer. You see more fighting in the movie, obviously, but it was fine. I liked it. I was just hoping we were gonna get something like I think that's what it is. After watching BVS, like that fight scene set the bar so high for Batman fights.
I completely agree with that.
That anything that doesn't at least meet that is like, oh, that's cool.
But were you more willing? I mean, because you're 100% right. That scene in BVS, that warehouse scene where he goes in and he just completely wipes out like
incredible
mercenaries.
Incredible.
The choreography of that was brilliant. And also, 100% right, that was the most Batman fight, live action Batman fight scene we'd ever gotten.
Even where he's like on the rafters, he's doing the stealth. Like before he even
when he
down
picks
on
the
them.
guy up and slams him into the crate.
There's so many. Or when he uses
grappling
grappling gun,
ground, rather, and he get the ground dents in.
When he freaking uses grappling gun to pull the crate towards him to bash his There's just so many bits. Or like again, the thing where the magnet thing where he uses to suck all their guns out of their hands. Like that's just so Batman. And in this, it was again, it's still early years. It's second year Batman.
This is my point, and that's what I was about to say.
Second year Batman.
Because while all that's true, I was more, and I think, weren't you more willing to forgive that? Because this is young Batman, and he hasn't moved into that phase yet where he's using technology.
He's not in his prime yet, but he did use a lot of cool technology in this film too.
But he's still early on.
It's true.
So I was ready for more ground and pound, like street level, brawler.
It's true.
Version of the character, because he's still learning a lot of his mastery of fighting techniques and different fighting styles, and even use of technology and integrating that into the Batman, being the Batman.
That's true.
That evolves over time, and you don't really get that full blown, master of all of these different things simultaneously until he's like in his prime.
I think what it is, I was just so hyped to see a Batman movie, and that BVS scene set the bar so high. I'm like, and it's something new. I'm like, I wonder what cool new thing they're going to do with Batman's fighting here.
It's just a version of what I'm saying that happened to me. We each had our expectations of what we wanted from it, and then it was different than what was expected. So because
it wasn't bad, by any means. It was just didn't meet my
it wasn't what you thought or hoped or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, as a fan, that's not on the filmmakers. That's us.
Yeah.
That's us, the film goers, and the people, the audience. We're putting expectations, or we're projecting our expectations onto the film. And Matt Reeves was very upfront. He told us this is a detective story. This is not your typical Batman film. So, I agree with everything you said. I just was much more willing to forgive that and even really expected it, because we knew also this is Batman in his second year.
It's angsty Batman.
It's angsty, broody Batman.
He's even got
Batman's always broody.
It's so funny too, because you see him throughout the film when he takes his cowl off. He's got like the long emo hair, and then even like the mascara running down, because they don't hide that in this film, which is cool. It's like they make it well aware that he paints his eyes black to blend in with the cowl. But it makes him look like he just got done coming back from a My Chemical Romance concert.
You know what it reminded me of is that YouTube channel, that guy who does the Emo's Not Dead.
Yeah, Matt Cutshall or something like.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that guy, and that made me laugh a couple of times in the film.
So funny.
There was a couple of moments in the movie where I found myself kind of snickering a little bit when I wasn't supposed to, but only because of they reminded me of something, or something just caught me funny. And I'm sorry if you guys can hear that weird whistling sound, where I think we might be getting invaded by aliens.
Will Smith is actually out there.
I hope so.
Saying welcome to Earth.
Somebody taking care of it. But if you guys can, I'm sorry about the noise.
Why did I go full what is it? Pirates of the Caribbean. Welcome to Earth.
But anyway, what I was saying is that there was a couple times in the movie where I found myself snickering a little bit when I wasn't supposed to, not because anything bad happened, but because it reminded me of something, or little character moments. Like one of them was when the Riddler is talking to Batman when they meet at Arkham, and he does that whole and he starts yelling, and it turns into I knew or something, or whatever he says. I had this all planned, but he does this really long scream. And the first time he does it, you're like, oh, this dude's crazy. But then he does it again, even longer and more exaggerated. And this is supposed to be a moment where he's really crazy. This is really showing how crazy this guy is. And, he did that scene he did. Paul Dano. I'm like,
where are you going with this? Because I love that whole scene.
No, that whole scene is really good. It's just that screaming eye thing.
Really?
The second time, I just was like,
really?
Well, actually, no. I did the first time. I kind of giggled a little bit, but the second time I was like,
no way.
It was funny to me.
No way.
I don't know. It just caught me funny. Not that it was bad. It was still a great scene.
I was in it. No, I was like, this guy's crazy.
It was a little bit over the top for me, and it caught me funny.
I was in it. I was like,
you were there.
Yeah.
No, I was totally in that scene. I was that whole interaction. like that guy. But that took me out of it for like a hair second, and then I was back.
The voice did remind me of the character he played in There Will Be Blood, though, Paul Dano. But that's just because he is the same dude. Obviously, he's gonna have the same voice.
Did you ever get a little bit like? Again, now I'm getting into like the
I think you're getting
weeds
into the
of
weeds.
my nitpicks.
I gotta brighten this up a little bit.
Did you ever get a little bit like it was a little bit too much where the Riddler was doing his whole live streams of his murders and the stuff like that, but where he was all in the camera, like the breathing heavy and just the presentation of it?
No, because he's crazy.
Yeah, it felt a little forced at times for me.
Oh no, I see that
was another one of the things that I felt like they did too much of.
No, it
overstayed its welcome a little bit.
It was another aspect though that kind of brought me back to the Nolan verse, because that's what the Joker does in The Dark Knight.
Yes.
So that's why
what I said, I don't know if I already said this, and forgive me if I did, but this movie, its premise, like its core motivations for the villains and all the whole thing, it reminded me of if the Riddler in this film, it was like Heath Ledger's the Joker with the motivation of the League of Shadows in Dark Knight Rises.
I mean, there's similarities for sure.
Yeah, that's how I came away. I was like, okay, the Riddler in this movie was essentially the Joker in terms of his portrayal of the character and how he acted, and even like the video, calls showing his. It's just, I thought in The Dark Knight, like they did that, but they did it in a much more reserved way. So you got a couple of scenes, but this one I felt like it overstayed. They did it too much.
Well, because in this film though, for me it made sense just because he's toying with Batman. Like he's literally leaving letters for Batman every crime scene. So
I loved that.
So the whole point is like,
the cryptography and
very, very, very cool. And I even love how they explain later that the Riddler says, like, as a boy, like I loved riddles. I love puzzles. That gave me solace. It was because he was, we find out that he was an orphan and stuff like that, and that's why he's actually after Bruce, and he doesn't like Bruce. He's like, are you an orphan in your $1 billion home while I'm sharing a room with 30 other kids and getting eaten by rats at night? It's like, that's with Gotham, but Gotham cares about you, but not us. And I thought that, again, I loved the Riddler in this film. I thought it was a really cool take on the character. It was exactly what I thought it was going to be. A very dark serial killer, crazy person Riddler who just uses his intelligence and riddles to enact these crazy murders. And like get to Batman. It's like, well, you got to figure it out if you want to. And that's the Riddler. It's just a dark version of the Riddler.
It's what you would expect from the Riddler. Like even the ciphers that he was leaving and all that kind of stuff. It's what you would expect. So a lot of that, I thought that they did well.
I mean, the moment you see
portraying, I thought it was very smart and it was compelling. It's just the actual core plot points of the motivations of the characters and how the story progressive. It was just extremely predictable. While it's cool in its presentation, the story overall, I felt was very.
I didn't even think it was that predictable.
That's where I landed on it.
Yeah, I mean, like
I never really felt surprised.
Really? So, like all those reveals, like with the Arkham thing, kind of leaning to like the Earth One Batman universe, or
it was
Celina's
like
relationship
a cool ad,
with
but it didn't feel like a surprise.
Really?
Yeah,
I was literally like, what? Like you literally made Thomas Wayne like dirty in this universe where he's working with the mob.
Yeah.
Like that's a big to do. That's a way big departure.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. You're like, yeah.
But I guess here's the thing. Okay. So as you get into this film, you realize it's two things. One, it's a detective story full on. But the second thing you realize very early is it's a mob film. This is a mob movie.
Kind of like The Dark Knight.
Yeah. So
again, this is my parallels here.
So if you're a fan of mob films, that's a lot of the stuff that goes on. So when you realize that very early on, like this is they tell you right from the get, this is just about corruption. This is about flushing out corruption.
But that's what
they tell you that right out of the gate.
That's literally what Batman is all about. That's his MO.
Yeah. But then they also fix it. So it wasn't really like you learn little things, but then you learn it wasn't as it really ends up being kind of what you thought.
I mean,
it's not the way that they're painting it. Just kind of. There's, Thomas made a small mistake, but then he immediately realized what he did and tries to correct it. So it's like, yes, but no. Yeah, so but it was not.
But it lends to the greater picture where, like, again, because that, I feel like Matt Reeves or anyone who does Batman, that's, if you're doing Batman, that's just the boxer unless you completely change it. Like, Batman's whole thing is to get rid of crime in Gotham.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. So it's like, there's only so many ways you could go with that. So it's like, at the root of it, no matter whether you're telling a campy Batman story or a mob Batman story, the premise has to be Batman getting rid of evil.
Without doubt.
In Gotham. And I thought they did a good job, especially at the end with the new mayor and stuff like that. How, like, it's like, hey, we're not perfect, we're getting there, and we've even got rid of some of the people who were working, all the crime that was within our own police department. And it was kind of like,
yeah, they show like not all of them are on your payroll,
right?
For Catwoman, Falcone,
yeah, and you see even like after the big like flood at the end and everything, how like they're looking to be better, which is kind of you know,
and it
like
ends on him saying like, I have to be more than vengeance.
It's like any good comic book story. Hope. Yeah, it ends on the hope, like we're gonna do better, we're gonna try, it's always gonna be there. And Batman even says at the end, like, crime now with the freaking natural disaster, not natural disaster, but the disaster that's happened in Gotham, like things are worse than ever right now, which is a perfect jumping on point for the second film, because it's like, yeah, what I'm doing is working, but unfortunately because of the acts of the Riddler, things are also kind of worse than ever.
Right.
So I thought that was a solid end and lead, because we know it's going to be a trilogy. There's no way this movie's not getting a trilogy. Like,
do we know for sure, by the way, how many films there's going to be out of this?
Matt Reeves says he has a trilogy in mind. And we know after that.
That's what I remember too.
We know that this is going to be successful enough to get greenlit. I guarantee you within the next week or two, we're going to be like, greenlit, like officially. So we know we're going to get another 2 movies. It's very unlikely that we're not.
Yes.
So I'm excited for them to explore that. And I want to get to another big point at the end of the film where it's Arkham Hospital, which I thought was really cool because as we know from Arkham lore, that's originally what it was called.
Right.
And kind of is what it's called. It's just people just kind of call it Arkham Asylum because they know the loonies go there, right?
Right.
But when Riddler's in his cell, he's got a cellmate. Well, he doesn't have a cellmate, but his neighbor, I guess, in the cell over to him, starts talking to him. And while he starts talking, and they even do a close-up on him, which he's still kind of in the shadow, but you can make out enough through what he's saying and even the silhouette and what you could see that this guy,
you know who it is generally,
is the Clown Prince of Crime.
Yeah.
The Joker.
Yeah.
So that was a rumor. We knew that. We said it on the podcast. Turns out to be true, which is kind of sucks. I hate what internet. I've complained about this. Would you stop trying to figure stuff out and let us just be surprised? Because I was like, dang it. So it is right. Like, I wanted it to be right, but I also kind of didn't, because like I was kind of waiting for it, because everyone, you know, the guy from Eternals, I forget which character from Eternals, but they said this guy's playing the Joker.
Plays
Druid, yeah, and they're like, this guy's gonna play the Joker, and turns out to be true. It's like, stop, just let us watch the movie first.
Yeah.
But that goes into the next one, which also, for me, another Nolan-esque thing. That's how the end of Batman Begins film. So there's lots of parallels. It's like almost kind of like following a template to a degree of what that franchise did.
Yeah, and again, I think that fed the lack of surprises for me. Is like there was a lot of those type of things that made it feel like I'd seen it before.
But the reason for bringing that up is, well, that's just huge because his number one nemesis, obviously the Joker. But what do you think of getting another live action Joker in probably 2 to 3 years here for when we get the sequel? Because, dude, we've gotten Ledger, then we got Leto, then we got Phoenix, and now this new one,
this new guy.
That's like 4 Jokers within like, I don't know, last decade.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
You know,
that's a lot of live action Jokers, and that's not counting the Gotham TV one. If you want to count the Gotham TV one, because it's technically live action, that's 5.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to pull up here. It's his name is Barry Keoghan. Is it Kogan? I apologize. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Keoghan. So maybe Keegan. But either way, he played Druid in the Eternals movie.
He's another one playing both sides, right? Jeffrey Wright is the Watcher. Then you have him as an Eternal, and now apparently the Joker.
So, you know, I kind of fall when it comes to this new Joker. I guess one, we talked about, we expected the Joker to show up in Matt Reeves.
For months, this was a rumor.
It was already, and also,
or I guess a leak. It's officially a leak now.
Well, also Matt Reeves said like one of the big inspirations for this film was A Long Halloween. You know, so if he follows that pattern, plus he's already introducing, we already knew for a fact he's introducing the Riddler, the Penguin, Catwoman, and potentially others. So it was kind of like a foregone conclusion. Like, we're going to get the Joker at some point. The only question for me was, also when, or were we going to see him at the end of this movie? Or was it just going to purely be a really simple tease that leads into the next one? Or, but also, what Joker are we getting? Are we getting a new one? Or are they going to work Joaquin Phoenix's Joker into this somehow? Which is really kind of what I wanted. That's what I vocalized. I really wanted to see that happen. And it's a brand new Joker. And obviously we're going to, I'm going to wait and see what they do with it, because you get just a very small dosing of it. Mostly you just hear him with the silhouette, and you get a very small, tiny glimpse through a window. You
can make out the grin and kind of the scarring on the cheeks.
Very, very little.
It was very Lee Bermejo Joker. Yeah. That's the first time I'm like, oh, so that's, from what we can see, it looks inspired by Lee Bermejo's version of the Joker.
I will say that it left me concerned, because the tone, his voice, the way he spoke, and the laugh, I was like,
I need to see more. I wasn't disappointed.
Yeah, you have to withhold judgment, but it kind of came off a little bit.
See,
television. I guess is a good way to put it.
I wasn't disappointed, nor was I blown away. It made me intrigued, especially with the look, because the look looked very like, this guy's gonna look crazy. Like if
we'll have to see.
Like because what you see from like the shadow on him, I imagine he's gonna look nuts when you full on see him and they put him in the light. But it's just a little teaser that like he's coming, he exists. We know for sure, because even when he's talking, he even says
he's riling up the Riddler.
He says clown in there, so it's like, wait, are we gonna get a team up for a next film?
That's certainly what they were ramping up to, and it looks like it may happen. Which again doesn't surprise. I mean, it also leaves off with the Penguin essentially taking over for Carmine Falcone. Right.
Awesome, dude.
Coming into power in his own right.
He was ripped right out of the Arkhamverse, I feel, too, that Penguin. Batman 1, Arkhamverse, very much that more modern mobster Joker. Mobster Penguin. Very, very cool. One of my favorite characters. He might be my favorite villain of the film. The more I think about it.
He was great. Before in the
Paul Dano was awesome, but there's something about Colin Farrell's performance as the Penguin was like, every time he was on screen, I'm like, dang. Well, take it easy, sweetheart. Like, just, it was so well done. And like when Batman interrogates him at the Iceberg Lounge, which was also dope to see the Iceberg Lounge in there. So like he's unfazed. He's like, what are you going to do to me? Like, it was just that mobster like, hey, you don't know how things work yet, fella. Yeah. Like, listen, vengeance. That's not how it's going to go down. Like, it was just so like good. Like, he's very, very funny too. Like a lot of his interaction. Like there was that one scene with him and Jim Gordon and Batman when they eventually catch him. That back and forth banter was hilarious. Like, what are you guys, idiots? You don't pick up Spanish. Like, come on, like, 'cause it's one of the clues. So freaking good. I am so excited for his HBO Max series.
That's gonna be a good one.
Because Colin Farrell told us too. He said he was also very vocal. That's the thing. Like, everyone involved in this film, they told us this all up front. Yeah. He's like, I'm only in 10 to 15 minutes of the film.
Yeah, he's not in that much.
But every time he's on screen, he steals the show.
Without doubt.
It's like, you're
one of my favorite characters in the entire movie.
For sure. I think
he might be my favorite.
I was gonna say he might be my favorite
character.
Which says something, because Batman was great and he's Batman, and Paul Dano was also fantastic. Yeah. But you know what it is for me, even though he wasn't in it that much, Colin Farrell caught that like spark for that character. That thing you can't really explain, but he just nailed it.
Like Heath Ledger in the Joker.
Right. It's just fantastic. And again, Paul Dano did great.
Excellent.
It's crazy, psychotic, but there's something for me about that Penguin performance. I'm like, this is it.
Like, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. It was really, really brilliant. And what the direction they went with him, because he doesn't have any.
I got you. You
freaking psycho,
dude! It's how sarcastic he
is. So good.
Oh, it's great.
But I loved that they went the more Arkham route, where he just looks like a heavy set gangster, like an Italian New York gangster. And
gangsta.
Yeah, there was no.
Where's my cannoli?
There was no hint. In other words, he had no the stereotypical Penguin physical features. No elongated nose or anything like that. He's scarred up. stuff like that. And they hint at him being mocked and ridiculed and stuff like that. But he's just, he's like Tony Soprano. I mean,
it's great.
It's
great.
But it's just remarkable. You can't stress enough how transformative the role is by Colin Farrell and the makeup team.
I now see, because you know what? That's another thing. They had to have known too, because he was the first one of the first ones, or whatever. Either way, he's the first character outside of this movie to get his own spinoff series.
Yeah.
Because the GCPD are getting one, but that's like the police department.
Right.
He's the first like solo character that's getting it. Because they had to be like, oh no, there's something here. We need to keep going.
I will say though, too, to your point about them doing the GCPD and the Penguin series, now having seen the movie, now I'm like, okay, now I get why they're doing this, because now they're going to show us Penguin coming into his own. Mm-hmm. They're going to show us Jim Gordon taking over and becoming Commissioner Gordon, so that once they reach the next film, they can just pick up from that, and that's already established. They don't have to deal with that in the film, which is brilliant.
I've also heard rumblings, which a lot of the rumors for this movie turned out to be true, that Batman will actually be appearing substantially in the series. Pattinson.
I mean, makes all the sense in the world.
Because
he exists in these worlds.
Right. So it's like, how can you, you could definitely do it just referencing to him, but like, if you want to do it, you have to have him on screen sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is like, wow. So that means this is like the next 6, 7, 10 years of Pattinson's life.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty dope.
But that element of it, I think, makes this more exciting, because you're really going to get to see a fully fleshed out storyline.
I'm hoping
from start to finish.
That's the thing, like, with this movie, where I like, because even in Batman Begins, like when Bruce comes back and stuff like that, he seemed like arrogant, and he seemed more sophisticated and adult, right?
Yeah.
In his mannerisms, where it's like you still kind of seem like not figured out, but you seem more confident in your ways. Where it's like, that technically wouldn't be true for like Batman when he's first coming, because especially when you read a lot of the comic books, Batman Year One and stuff, he's figuring stuff out. He's young, he gets like blown up in a building, like his relationship with Gordon isn't even good yet. So this, I think, did a much better job exploring the early years of Bruce being Batman.
Yeah.
Where like his attitude isn't fully there yet. He's figuring things out. He's angsty is the best word, where he's kind of just like,
angry.
He's just angry,
really
moody, like he's figuring things out. And I love the idea that like in the HBO Max series, or even the second movie, like we even have a new bat suit, because this bat suit really cool.
Yeah,
definitely. Like, this is clearly your first bat suit.
Yep.
This is clearly like a Model 1.
Yeah,
and kind of like Iron Man in the MCU, where like every film, it's gonna get upgraded and new, and then probably by the second, definitely the third, we'll have a more realized like Batman suit, where it's more of the iconic stereotypical look.
Yeah.
So I can't wait. I love the fact that we'll probably get to explore that, because I'm hoping they go the Disney Plus route with Marvel Studios, where like,
yeah, it seems like it.
Where obviously we're getting the shows that's tied to the movie, but I want like now to like give us Batman, treat it like it's a movie, same budget. Yeah. Put Pattinson in there, and then we'll see him. That'll directly lead into the sequel. So you have to watch the shows to watch the sequel and to make it sense, and that's gonna force people, because this movie's gonna be hugely successful. Like, it's gonna be. Even right now, it's got like, as of last checking, it's got like an 86 on Rotten Tomatoes, right?
And it's highly anticipated. People don't want to see this film yet.
So like, it's gonna force people who don't have HBO Max that want to see where Batman goes from here are gonna get it just for the Penguin or just for GCPD, because they want to see where it goes, and then it's the whole Disney Plus model. So if they're smart, they will do things in that show that you kind of have to watch to understand going forward.
And I'm hoping that in the series, they also take the opportunity, because one of the other cool things that they did with this film is introducing this young Batman, and particularly this version as they laid him out, because, they did a couple of cool things that I was glad to see that they did not do in this film. Is we did not get an origin of Batman.
No, they just allude to things.
They just like simple, like small, like hints at as the story progresses. So we didn't get like the flashbacks, and we didn't do that again.
This is what I'm talking about, the staring.
So I was glad.
What I said earlier, that like Pattinson staring, his gaze, where he just looks at the mayor who got killed in the beginning.
Yeah,
he looks at his son, and he just looks at him, and everyone knows his origin, so everyone knows he's like looking at him, because like that was me like 20 years ago,
without doubt.
And it's just, you just get it. It's like that similar.
They did a really good job with that, and this is the other thing that I liked, is that they were showing a Bruce Wayne who had not embraced his role as Bruce Wayne, the head of the Wayne family. Now, he had not yet come to grips with the fact of I have to be both Bruce Wayne, the billionaire businessman, and Batman. And one will help the other and vice versa. Like, he hasn't figured that part out yet. I like that they did that in this film, because that means we're going to be allowed to see him fully embrace it, which is what's going to lead to like a completely redesigned Batmobile, a completely redesigned Batcave, a completely redesigned Batsuit. And he's going to integrate all those things as he starts to figure out, okay, I have to be both, because to really be Batman, I need to be Bruce Wayne.
Well, Alfred points that out in the very beginning of the film. The first time you go to the Batcave, and the first time you see Alfred come in the elevator to meet Bruce, who's looking at the surveillance footage that he got with his lenses, he tells him, like, dude, you have to. He's like, we have stock meetings, and these people come in the house. You have
the
to.
Accountants.
The accountants.
And he's like, I don't care.
He's like, why are they here? He's like, because you won't go to them, so I had them come here. And Alfred's like, you seem like doing the books, so to speak. He's like, dude, you're gonna run out of money soon. Like, you have to take over your family's company.
I mean, he flat out says, I don't care about any of that. He goes, you don't care about your family's legacy?
Yeah.
And he says, this is my family's legacy, being Batman.
Right.
So he hasn't figured that out yet, that no, that's not going to work.
That's what I'm saying. And it's really, really cool to see that contrast within there. And to eventually he's going to have to. But that leads to my next thing, where they kind of touch on that later, where he's talking to Riddler in the interrogation scene. Again, we've talked about the scene again, but so much happened in that scene, where like Riddler tells him, he's like, people don't like get it. Like, that, I love masks. That mask, people don't understand. That's you. The facade is when you don't have a mask on.
That was such a great reference.
He literally says, when you're wearing a mask, it allows you to be your real self, because you don't have to. If people don't know who you are, you don't have to follow rules to take accountability. You can do whatever you really want to do.
Yeah.
So I loved that kind of just like psychology of it, because that's like true in real life, right? Like, even in like all the riots and horrible stuff's going on in the world, you see people wearing masks and stuff like that. So it's like, they don't have to be accountable for their actions. They can really do what they want to do and don't have to hold back.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's so true. But it also, for me, everyone knows everything goes back to Batman animated series for me. Kevin Conroy has said many, many times in interviews, when he played Batman, when he got the part, he figured out very, very early on that Bruce is the mask.
Yeah.
Batman is his real self.
Right.
So, and that's how he did the voices. So when he's doing the Bruce Wayne voice, that kind of high pitched voice, that's the fake Bruce Wayne, like, hi everyone. That's the fake self. When he's going and when he's Batman, that's the real voice.
Yeah.
And I was like, they literally acknowledge that in this movie, that the mask is the real person and Bruce is like the facade. And you see that Bruce
Really
says it several times. I'm like, they did it in live action. I'm like, yes, but that's one of the reasons I like this movie so much. And the more I'm sitting on it, I'm like, because there's so many aspects as a Batman lover that Matt Reeves understood.
Yes.
Like the
100%.
mood,
I agree with that completely.
The mood of it, like the relationship with Alfred, like his relationship with the city, the whole mask part. There's so many things where it's like, no, that's Batman. Like, whether you like the film or not, that's those bits, the core of it. You cannot argue that he understands who Batman is.
I agree with that completely. To construct the world that he has constructed thus far, and it's clearly is constructing, to tell the Batman story that he's telling, you have to have a really well-rounded understanding of who Batman is, his character, his entire history, I mean, the different versions of the character that we have gotten, and why the different ones, have been able, or why there have been able to be these different iterations of the character, and why they still work within the construct of Bruce Wayne Batman as a character.
It kind of makes all the sense to me. It kind of makes all the sense in the world to me too, that he's working with J.J. Abrams and Bruce Timm on the animated version for the new Batman Caped Crusader series that will be on HBO Max, because it's just, he gets it. He knows his stuff when it comes. He loves the character. You can tell. He's definitely, because when you watch comic book movies so often, you're like, this person doesn't really like the character. They're not honoring the character. That's my biggest complaint.
Oh, we talk about it all the time.
All the time. When you take a property or famous IP and you're basically just using like the name Batman or the name Star Wars or whatever have you to bring the audience in, and then we watch, you're like, but that's not really what that is at its root.
Yeah.
Not the case with this. Matt Reeves knows what Batman is. He respects it. He knows what the fan base wants, and he gave us something, again, my like, if I was to give like a tag for it, something new but familiar, and I loved it.
That's fair. I would not put love just because of the things that I've said in terms of story and pacing and all of that stuff. So I can't say I loved. I'll say I like it, and I want to see it again now with fresh eyes and be more objective, because now all of my expectations are now gone. So I've been able to, those are off the board.
Mm-hmm.
So now I know what it is. Now I want to go see it again with fresh eyes.
It's kind of weird, like,
and come out and then see how I feel about it the second time.
Because again, we're not even 24 hours with it sinking in yet. Right. So like, even as I'm talking about it with you, I'm kind of figuring out like, oh, I did know. Yeah. Like just dissecting it and thinking about it more and sleeping on it. I'm like, no, yeah, I did, like, because they nailed Batman. It's like, as a big Batman fan, what can I really complain about when like all the key components were there? Like I can nitpick with like maybe the fighting or the pacing, but like as far as nailing Batman with, as a whole, got it. So it's like,
that's true.
You got
that's
it. Like
true.
what, you know what I mean? It's like, I'd be like, it sucks. It's like, no, you did it. That's Batman. It's great.
Yeah, that's why I say all of my issues that I have with it are threefold. One is my own expectations that I projected onto the film, and it wasn't what I guess I had hoped. But the other two are it's story, not character problems. It's like the performances are all good, the characters are good. It was just the story and the pacing.
I want to see. I really want to see it again. I want to see it again, especially now the more talking about it and stuff like that. Because it's like anything, the more you talk and digest it, the more you either like it or you don't like it. I'm obviously even liking it more and more I talk about it. But it was good. It was good. It was good. It was good. There's just so many cool parts. The Batmobile scene. It was just different too. Again, I love the fact that it was very, very, because it's like, that's the trouble with Batman. And even if they bring the Joker, it's like, which, I mean, he's already introduced, but it's like, what are you going to do that we haven't seen, especially recent? Like Batman, I think we talked about on the podcast before, like he's the character who's had the most films out of any superhero, period.
Oh yeah, by far.
So it's like, there's been so many interpretations of him. It's like, what are you going to do that sets it apart? And Matt Reeves definitely found a way to set it apart. That's another thing too, where it's like, you may not get this or that or something like the Snyderverse, but I'm trying to be fair. It's like, would I really want him to do that at the same time? It's like, because even as a creative, it's like, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over. Because then we'd be like, this is just Snyder's Batman. Why didn't Snyder just continue? Yeah. You have to do something different. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over.
To that point, another big thing that we have not really gone into, we can mention now, is another big thing that he added to the live action version of Batman that we had not really gotten before. Not like this, is the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Celina Kyle.
Tom King had to.
He was somewhere just smiling
if he's seen this movie yet, or when he sees this movie, because especially they literally use the line Celina says to Batman,
the bat and the cat.
The bat and the cat. Now, while I don't know for sure he coined that term, he definitely made that term popular. For sure. So I don't know if he coined it, but it's definitely popular in recent years because of Tom King.
Without any
doubt.
Like
his whole almost 100 issue run on Batman was literally all about Bat and the Cat, Bat and the Cat.
He has explored, and then he went on to make the Batman in Catwoman Black Label series. So he has explored Batman and Catwoman's relationship in a way that no one else, I think, ever has.
For sure. And I think this is the best.
And it's closer to what Tom King has done.
Now, I love, for nostalgia reasons and whatever, no one could ever replace Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman for me.
Right.
Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman is iconic. I grew up with it. Nostalgia alone, I'm like, nah. But Zoe Kravitz was great.
Fantastic.
As Catwoman.
Really great.
Great. And it was another thing, too. It's like, we kind of just, not so recently, but recent enough, Anne Hathaway as Catwoman.
Yeah.
So initially, I'm like, no. I feel like,
I thought they handled her really well in terms of like Catwoman as a character or Celina Kyle as a character.
Like, she looked ripped right out of the comic books. Her demeanor, her relationship with Batman was great. And that's another thing I want to say that I liked about this movie as a whole. Because we knew from the bat, you got the Penguin, the Riddler, and Catwoman. And then Falcone.
Falcone, yeah.
In this as well. And it's like, dang, dude, you got like 4 or 5 villains in this movie. How are you going to do that?
Yeah.
And to Matt Reeves' credit,
handled it really well.
It worked perfectly.
Yeah.
Which
I think the trick on that, and the reason it works so well, and we talked about this before privately, is that they didn't oversaturate any one character.
For sure. Because a lot of people complain about Spider-Man 3. Like, the movie sucked so bad because there were so many villains. I'm like, that's not why it wasn't good. That's definitely not the case. I mean, I think Endgame, Avengers, all these movies prove that wrong. It's like, it's not you can make 5, 4, 10 characters, 20 characters, as Endgame and all these movies proved, work. You can make all these massive characters work. It's all about how you approach it and tell the story.
Exactly right.
So like when people are like, there's so many villains, it's gonna be overcrowded. I'm like, that's not true. It just depends how they do it.
Yeah.
So, and I think this movie is a perfect example, like, several of the Marvel films, that you can make several characters work if they're used appropriately and not too much. Because I think it's kind of like the whole make them want more thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's lended to Penguin as well.
I agree.
Where he wasn't in it that much, but when he was on it, you just wanted more.
Yeah.
And they're like, here's a little bit, and then we're pulling back. And now I just want more of him.
And they didn't feel like, and this was, I think, one of the mistakes that Zack Snyder made with BVS, is they didn't feel like, Matt Reeves didn't feel like he needed to give us fleshed out backstories for every single character.
Yeah.
He didn't tell us everything we needed to know about every single person. He gave us little bits, just enough for the character to make sense within the world and the story as it was needed. So it was just the right dosage of each particular character within the context of the story he was telling. And he just did it in a really smart way. You never felt like it was too much. There was too much happening, and it made it feel convoluted in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So the story was very straightforward. It was very well told for the story he was telling. So to make sure that I'm clear on that, like when I say the story, it was just the lack of surprises for me and the predictability of the story. But the way that the story was told was very well done. The story he was telling. Yeah. It was very well told. All the pieces worked. That sort of a thing. All the characters, the many different characters that, he initiated and introduced right out of the gate. He did the perfect amount of each character, and they fit very well. So they did a great job of that. But going back to Batman and Catwoman's relationship, Celina Kyle, Bruce Wayne, well, she doesn't know it's Bruce Wayne. But, their relationship in this, I thought they just did a killer job, and their chemistry was fantastic.
Great.
Zoe Kravitz, man, I was really blown away. She was awesome as Celina Kyle. She is awesome as Celina Kyle.
Yeah, she's great, and I feel like almost everything she's in.
She's really good.
She's great.
She's great in the Fantastic Beasts movies.
Yeah, she was great in that, although, they got rid of her. Sucks.
Did she die?
She died in the second one, yeah.
Spoiler alert.
That movie's like, what, 4 or 5 years old? No way. If you haven't seen it, that's not our fault.
She died. It's Leota, right? Or Lee? Not Leota.
Lita.
Lita?
L-E-T-A?
Lita Lestrange?
Lita Lestrange, yeah. She dies towards the end of the second film.
Yeah.
But anyway, Crimes of Grindelwald.
Yeah, very good. But and I'm very excited to see what they do with that relationship. I thought they built a really solid foundation for Batman Catwoman in this movie.
Even how they left it, where
they're parting ways. They literally go separate directions. The bike is symbolic of we're going 2 different directions.
But is it?
But not.
Is it? Yeah. No, she invites him to come with him too, and she's like, "Oh, I forgot you're already taken." As you see the bat symbol in the background, so there was just a lot of cool things. That was also, very Tom King, but very reminiscent to their relationship in Batman the Animated Series, where a big part of Batman the Animated Series is Batman and Catwoman's relationship. It's constantly coming around, and she's constantly trying to, bring him with him and stuff like that. And he wants her, but he can't because crime. and
again, none of that was a surprise. You knew by the trailers and stuff that they were doing the Tom King, but it was just done well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, this movie, Tim, I want to see it again, but the more I talk about it, the more I'm liking it, and I already really liked it.
To that point, so to wrap us up here as we close out our spoiler version of this, so to close out, now having seen the movie after years now of hype and us being excited about this film, especially the past year as we led up to it, did it land on your level of expectations and hype factor that you had going into the movie?
Initial reactions, yes and no, because even though he told us what it was, I guess I didn't expect it to go the route it did. I knew it was gonna be a detective movie. He said it, but it was still a little different than I thought. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, no, this is a solid Batman movie. I have to see it a second time though to really answer that though too. Initially, it's still yes and no is where I'm at.
So I guess this is a good way to put it. When you came out of it, did you feel the way that you hoped to feel coming out of the movie?
I didn't have
just a gut response.
No, I had to sit on it a little bit. Yeah, it wasn't initially
So no, then
it wasn't like Infinity War where it ended and I'm like,
You're like amped
just
up.
happened in my life. Like, because that movie, that was like, really, like so many things. But that was also like a 10-year build and stuff like that. No, but it was such a different movie because this movie made you think, and I had to think after the fact. I think that's why I didn't, because I went into it thinking it was probably just going to be like a superhero comic book action movie, way more action. And by the time it was done, it was a movie that made me think a lot more. Than I. And again, they said that, so I should have, been more in that mindset. So that's why I had to think of it more. And as I think of it, the more I'm liking it.
Okay.
What about you? I know
I think on that front, I think that we were landing in the same spot where we came out of the movie. Whereas at the level, like when you go into movies like this, you kind of have this, whether it's just that endorphin release of like, you know what I mean? Of it hitting all of the buttons that you're hoping it's going to hit, and you come out just jacked up, excited about, and feeling like, man, that was just epic. That it was just there was so many things that just didn't land where I thought they were going to land, that it would left me like that. It did not satisfy me initially. And I don't feel satisfied by it. Oh,
really?
I just feel like it was a good movie. I liked it. I see what they did with it, but there's certain things that were missing from it for me. So I still don't feel satisfied, and it definitely did not hit the level of expectation.
You know what it is?
I built up myself. That goes back to like, that's just me.
I'll give a good analogy how I felt once we walked out of the theater. It's like, I love strawberry ice cream. I love chocolate ice cream. I ordered strawberry ice cream. They give me chocolate. Still love chocolate, but I was expecting strawberry.
And you really wanted strawberry at that moment.
Oh, yeah. So it's like, it was just still love it, but it was different than what I thought it was going to end up being.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
But I do want to say, I think I might have said it earlier. I'm going to say it again though. One of my favorite aspects of the movie though was the narration. Like it was it's why I brought my Batman novels here, Tim. Hush, because in these books, some of the greatest Batman stories of all time, Batman Hush, The Long Halloween, Court of Owls, Ego, all that stuff, Batman begins by narrating the situation while you see panels of what's going on and things happening. And that's how the movie starts and how the movie ends, with Bruce or Batman giving narration of what
they
the
even
city's
show
like.
us. They even show us him writing in his observation journals.
Dude, it was so good. That is so Batman. That's they did so many things that's so Batman. It's like you just open up his book, like right here, like let's see. You just see it. First thing, Batman's narrating while he's doing stuff. And that's exactly how the movie went.
Detective.
It was great. Yeah. It was great. And we never really saw it done like that before. And I'm like, and there was so many things like that he's like, I said it like, 10 minutes ago. That's Batman. It's like, how as a Batman fan can I not like this movie?
Yeah. To that end, this movie, they did a really great job of showing us Batman.
I'm curious to see, because again, we've been beaten like a dead horse. We've only seen it once, but like anything, I'm curious to see after repeat viewings and stuff like that over the years, how this is going to stand the test of time and how it's going to be received by fandom in the long run.
Yeah. Even just out of the gate, I'm really curious to see broadly how all of you are going to react to this movie. Yeah. And so when you go see it, you've got to let us know. Many of you, if you're watching this, I would assume you've seen it. If you're watching, if you're watching this episode and you've listened to us talk openly about this, I would hope that you have already seen it.
Unless they're all about chaos like the Joker, and they're just like, I just want everything spoiled.
Just you don't care about spoilers. But if you have seen the film, once you do, make sure to let us know, because I'm very curious to see what the overall fan response to the film is going to be. Kind
of what I was alluding to. Do you think there's stuff in this film that will stand the test of time and be talked about, like The Dark Knight or even Dark Knight Rises and stuff?
Do. Penguin especially.
There's just like beats and like lines and dialogues and scenes where it's like, now that's officially like iconic in Batman lore.
Yeah, I think I absolutely think that, because you can tell, and it goes to what we were talking about before about the depth of the world because of Matt Reeves. The writing team, Matt Reeves as the creative head, as director, you can tell there's a really deep understanding of Batman as a character and the world that he lives in. So, and they're pulling pieces from all these different places, and it's allowing them, you can already see it with this film, they're building a very deep, rich Batman universe that is going to enable them to tell some really memorable stories that we haven't seen in this way.
I just keep repeating the line, please do not lie.
Yeah.
What's the price for your blind eye? I love how his voice would go up and down too, because his voice was different depending on his mood.
Yeah,
which sometimes it was really, really low and sometimes it went high. I thought that was
he did it when he was
unique.
talking to him face to face.
Dude, it's crazy.
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff.
Okay, I know we're ending it, but I keep going on. But I love when you get to the interrogation scene and they're behind the glass and it lights up. They open it where you see him, and you just see the Riddler, Paul Dano, sitting there like smiling like a little IT happy nerd. Like it's just like, this is the freaking Riddler, the serial killer dude who's doing all these crazy killing contraptions and things.
I knew you'd come.
Dude. Yeah. All right. Yes.
So in short,
so let's go see the movie again.
We're going to see it again. We're actually going to see it again here in the next couple of days. But do let us know what you guys think about the movie. I'm very curious and anxious to know Arris too, to see what you guys think about this film. We both liked it at varying degrees with our little nitpicks. But remember, drop your opinion in the comment section below, and we'll
I wonder how it's
going
to stack up against Batman Begins, because that's a fair stack.
I would say so.
Man,
this movie had so many, not to go off on another thing, it had so many different elements of that first Nolan trilogy.
For sure.
So I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
But in any case, on that note, we'll see you guys next time when we talk about all things comics.